Richard Rider, the man called Nova, debuted in 1976 by the legendary duo of Marv Wolfman and John Romita Sr. But the story of Nova actually goes back a decade before that. Let's talk about Richard Rider, the man called Nova. Before we do that, let me say thank you for watching JLS Comics, whether it's your first time here or you're back for more. If you enjoy the videos or videos like this, don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss the content I upload just like this every few days. Let's jump into the story. In 1996, comic book writer Marv Wolfman was working as the publisher of a fanzine called Super Adventures, and it was in those pages that the concept behind Nova would be born. He was first called the Star and later changed to Black Nova. 10 years later, Marv Wolfman brought his concept to Marvel, where he teamed up with Romita Sr. They changed the costume a bit and added a comet streak to his flight path, which was inspired by Mighty Mouse, and that's important for later on. To understand Nova, we have to take a look at the planet and the people from which his powers are derived. So we turn our story to the planet Xandar and the Green Lantern Corps inspired Nova Corps. Xandarians are a generally peaceful people, but facing complete devastation has forced them into war on many occasions. The main city on Xandar is called Orienta Shard, and underneath the city is a massive living computer called World Mind, which houses within all of the knowledge and memories of all the Novas past and present, along with their history and their culture. And World Mind also harnesses, monitors, and controls an ancient primordial force called the Nova Force, a power which the World Mind grants to those within the ranks of the Xandarian law enforcement, if you will, called the Nova Corps. The higher your rank in the Nova Corps, the more Nova Force you're granted. The highest level, akin to a general or an admiral perhaps, is Nova Prime. In 1976, Nova Prime was a guy named Roman Day, played by John C. Reilly in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Galactus destroyed the homeworld of an alien named Zor. So Zor went to Xandar hoping to take its power and heal his own planet. So Day prevented him from doing this as Nova Prime and tried to stop him from targeting Earth next. Day and his spaceship wound up at Earth's doorstep where he, wounded, broken, and dying, sent a Nova Force to find a worthy wielder on planet Earth. Enter a young Peter Parker-ish kid from Harry Truman High School in Long Island, New York, Richard Rider. Rider was at Uncle Fudge's ice cream parlor with his girlfriend Ginger J when he was hit twice, once by his Flash Thompson-like bully and the next by the Nova Force that Day had sent out, which knocked him right back to the ground unconscious. When he awoke, he mind-linked with Nova Prime, who told him of the power that he'd just been granted, and this was just before Day passed away. Took a little while, some rogue energy blasts, and some testing to fully transform into Nova. As old Buckethead, Nova grew from this timid kid who was lacking confidence into a cocky, brash hero who was never going to back down from a fight. And with his newfound power, he fought a whole menagerie of supervillains, like the Condor and the Sphinx and Diamond Head and Powerhouse. And it wouldn't be until issue 21 of that series when he finally told his family that he was Nova. At the end of the series, Nova ended up running into a fleet of ships from a warlike alien race called the Skrulls. The Queen of Xandar, named Queen Adora, reached out to the Fantastic Four for help. And that's when Nova's story went from the end of the first volume into Fantastic Four, where Nova teamed up with the FF to stop the Skrulls. Nova was next in Rom with his allies, the New Champions, where a Galadorian space knight named Rom also helped them defeat the Skrulls. After that, Nova wanted to go back to Earth, so he gave up his power, left it on Xandar, and went back to Earth, powerless, but with the intent of helping defend it against the Dire race. On Earth, Richard worked odd jobs and started working out at a gym to compensate for his power loss. And this is when Nebula, daughter of Zor, attacked Xandar with Thanos' ship and devastated the planet once again. Queen Adora of Xandar gave the Nova Force to a guy named Garthan Saul, who went mad from the immense power of the Nova Force, and he became a villain called Supernova. To stop him, Adora gave some of Rider's powers back to him. This was at the exact moment that in New Warriors #1, Night Thrasher threw Richard off a building, which he was hoping would reactivate his powers, and Nova, calling himself Kid Nova, was now teamed up with the New Warriors. He dated a girl named Laura Dunham for a while, and was also romantic with Namorita. Nova's costume was changed a bit here, and the artist Ron Frenz says he was inspired by both Race Bannon from Johnny Quest and the original Golden Age Fawcett Comics Captain Marvel. And also he was called Kid Marvel here to differentiate between him and Frankie Ray, who was also called Nova during this time. In a story called The Starlost Saga, Supernova and Richard Rider battled, but the battle drained Nova and it nearly killed him. And that's when another Xandarian, who was at one time a herald of Galactus named Airwalker, revived Richard, and together they battled Supernova. Nova sent all of his Nova Force into the World Mind to reboot it. And as a thank you, Queen Adora gave him some of that power back and actually leveled up his powers from there. Later, Nova wound up in an alternate dimension, where he met an alternate Nova called Nova 00, who taught him him his power to open stargates. So he opened one and went back to the main universe, defying Queen Adora to fight the very 1990s sounding Death Storm. Adora was mad, so she took his power away and gave it to Garth Saul, who was assigned to protect Earth, and he went from Supernova to being Nova Omega. And again, powerless, Richard jumped off a building, hoping to kickstart his powers again like he did with Night Thrasher. And ultimately, Nova Omega was killed by the Dire-Wraith Queen, and Richard got his power back, but without having to jump off of a building. The original plan here was actually to have Nova become a Space Knight, but the series got cut short, so they actually had to wrap that up quickly. During Infinity Gauntlet, Nova helped stop Thanos, and then in Infinity War, he had to help stop Magus, the bad side of Adam Warlock, from getting the Infinity Gems. And in the third part, Infinity Crusade, Nova had to help stop Goddess, Adam Warlock's good side, from turning the cosmos into her religious slaves. In 1999, Eric Larson wrote a 7-issue series called Nova the Human Rocket, where Nova met Savage Dragon, which is a character Larson made for Image Comics. He also wrote a story at one point for the anthology series Marvel Comics Presents, but it was canceled, which is how he wound up with this series. Eric got to sneak Nova into a backup story in 2000's Savage Dragon 82. New Warriors got a reboot right around the year 2000. Nova got a new costume, and it first showed up in the 0 issue of New Warriors, which came in a Wizard magazine. It was not received well, and it was quickly changed. A few years later, a massive comic event in 2006 called Annihilation swept through the Marvel Universe. Annihilus and his Annihilation Wave came from the Negative Zone to attack the 616 universe. After destroying a prison colony, they came for Xandar next, causing it to be completely destroyed for the third time, leaving Richard Rider as the last remaining Nova Corpsman. So Worldmind downloaded itself into Nova, giving him the immense power and the entirety of the Nova Force. And leaving a ruined Xandar behind, Nova was confronted with an armada of ships, which he used his newfound power levels and his rage to completely destroy. He met up with Quasar to protect a planet of refugees from being destroyed by the Annihilation Wave, and Nova was able to save 11.6 million people in the process. And he cut a bloody path through the Annihilation Wave ships right to Annihilus and his command ship. But they ended up parting ways, and after months of fighting, Nova fought with Annihilus again, where he reached into his throat and ripped out Annihilus's organs, killing him immediately. During Annihilation Conquest, the techno-organic species called the Phalanx took advantage of the aftermath of Annihilation to attack. They ended up possessing Nova, but he met up with Warlock, Gamora, and Drax to defeat the Phalanx, fighting them on the Kree homeworld of Hala. During this time, a female Kree warrior named Ko-Rel was given a sliver of the Nova Force by a badly injured Nova, but soon thereafter she was stabbed and killed by Gamora. During another event called Secret Invasion, Nova teamed up with Darkhawk to help fight the Skrulls. And in Dan Abnett's Nova series, some scientists from Project Pegasus, the project from the Captain Marvel movie, are able to use some of the Worldmind power in Nova to revive Quasar. So after all that happened, with Xandar still destroyed, the Worldmind was trying to rebuild it and the Nova Corps, and was doing so without the knowledge of Nova. So they fought. Nova was stripped of his Nova Force in issues 21 and 22. But he relied on the Force for survival, and so he ended up borrowing the revived Quasar's quantum bands so he wouldn't die. And in the process, Nova became Quasar. He ended up helping the new Nova Corps during War of Kings and ended up getting his power back and even helped train the new Nova Corps members. But it wasn't long before a new cosmic threat loomed over the galaxy. Warriors of the Cancerverse came through a dimensional rift called the Fault to invade the 616 universe, along with a weaponized version of Galactus called the Galactus Engine. Nova fought a dark Quasar as Magus killed trillions of people and ripped the Fault wide open. Later, Nova teamed up with Quasar, Beta Ray Bill, Silver Surfer, Ronan, and Gladiator. But as they won and the Fault collapsed, Nova and Star-Lord were trapped inside the Cancerverse. Inside there, Star-Lord pulled out a cosmic cube and he, along with Nova and the entirety of the Nova Force that the Worldmind gave to him, blasted Thanos in a burst of blinding light. It seemed to everyone else that Nova and Star-Lord were dead. The Worldmind was forced to reboot without the Nova Force, and it was a sad, devastating day for Richard Rider and his friends and all his family. But it turns out that they were still alive inside the Cancerverse. Star-Lord and Nova were fighting the Revengers, and Thanos was trapped in there too, and they couldn't die. The rules were different in the Cancerverse. Still, the Cancerverse version of Captain America severed Nova's arm in a battle as the Revengers stole the Cosmic Cube from Quill. Nova was able to get the Cosmic Cube back, and as he admitted his love for Gamora to Quill, he used the cube to open a portal for them to go back to the main universe. But Nova had to stay behind because he had to keep the portal open. There was a subset of the Nova Corps called the Black Novas, and they're Black Ops, special operators within the Nova Corps, and one of these was a guy named Jesse Alexander. Jesse had 2 children, Sam and Kalen. Sam Alexander would go on to become a Nova in his own right, even joining the Avengers pretty quickly, where Richard seemingly wasn't able to. Sam found the World Mind and Richard were still alive, but Richard's consciousness was trapped inside the World Mind with all of the other Nova consciousnesses. Richard Rider would go on to become Sam's mentor when he did ultimately get out of the Cancerverse in Jeff Loveness's Nova series in 2017. However, it turns out that the World Mind now controlled the Cancerverse, and when Richard came back, something evil came with him, and it took him over. So Sam and a mutated, monstrous Richard, now also controlled by World Mind, fought in Nova issue 7, inside the Cancerverse no less. Sam appealed to the human side of Richard, calling him the greatest Nova there ever was. And so Richard used all of his willpower to rip the Cancerverse influence right out of his own throat. And he threw it on the ground and blasted it apart. Thanos showed up with the Cosmic Cube, and they used it to all go back home. Nova then teamed up with the Guardians of the Galaxy and fought beside them through Infinity Countdown, and he fought a giant monster in 2019's Black Order miniseries before running into the Black Order themselves. In Donny Cates' 2019 Guardian series, Star Fox called together a group to hunt down whomever Thanos might have put his consciousness inside of. The first target was Gamora, and Nebula's idea was to use Richard Rider's mind to find her. He loved Gamora, by the way, still. Nova flew off to warn Gamora, but the Dark Guardians, including Nebula, were tracking them, and so he stood with the Guardians against the Dark Guardians. And then the Cancerverse came back, but this time it invaded Annihilus's negative zone in Matt Rosenberg's 2019 Annihilation Scourge event. Annihilus reached out to Nova for help during this time, and so he put a trench coat on Annihilus and brought him to Yancey Street, where Franklin and Valeria Richards met them at the home of the Fantastic Four. And they went back to the negative zone with Annihilus, where he ran into the Sentry and the Revengers once again. And the last time I saw Nova was in Al Ewing's 2020 run on Guardians. He showed up at the Guardians barbecue to ask for help taking on some rogue Olympians. He joined Star-Lord, Rocket Raccoon, Moondragon, Phyla-Val, and Novar as Marvel Boy. And so that's how we leave Richard Rider, Nova, the human rocket, as we jet into the future. And so here we adjust our gears to the live-action world. Do you know how long it's been that Marvel's been prepared for Nova to make his entry into movies? Marvel's VP of Business Affairs, a lady named Alice Donenfeld, published a full-page ad in Variety magazine in May of 1979. And it says, "The man called Nova is but one of over 100 exciting characters ready right now to star in motion picture or TV productions. All characters have their own identity, their own personal story, and the potential for outrageous stardom." In 1997, Nova creator Marv Wolfman actually sued Marvel during the build-up to the first Blade movie for copyright of Nova and Blade and other characters that he had made, but he lost. Unfortunately, the judge thought that he and Romita Sr. had changed the character enough from his earlier fanzine appearance, remember I said that was important, to make him a new character. In 2019, Kevin Feige, head of Marvel Studios, said, "If we have a big board with a bunch of characters that have immediate potential, Nova's on the board. Because of his connection to the Guardians universe, because there are more than one example to pull from in the comics that are interesting, and you're absolutely right, he was in the earliest drafts of Guardians of the Galaxy." And we won't mention the Russo's joke about the Nova Easter egg in Avengers Endgame. And in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, the planet Xandar is decimated. It happened just before the start of Avengers Infinity War, as Thanos claimed the Power Stone as his own. The setup for Nova and the groundwork have already been laid out by Kevin Feige and his team. And with Robert Downey Jr. retiring the mantle of Iron Man, introducing Nova right now, especially with the way he communicates with the World Mind via his helmet, much in the same way that Stark interfaces with Jarvis and Friday or Spider-Man with Suit Lady, will be perfect timing. And now in May of 2020, Nova has hit production grids, and it looks like the property is finally moving forward. He's finally going to make his long-awaited debut. And so now you have the entire history of Richard Rider as Nova, and you'll be fully prepared for him to make his live-action debut in the upcoming years. That's a wrap on this one, my friends. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you can be one of the first to know when I upload videos just like this each and every week. I'm Jesse, this is JLS Comics, and I'll see you soon.